It is 5:19 a.m. on 8th November 1942. The British destroyer HMS Broke is alone in the darkness. Her mission: to breach the steel defences of Algiers harbour and land a single battalion of American infantry. 3 times she has attempted the breach, and 3 times she has been turned back by a curtain of Vichy French fire. Her sister ship, HMS Malcolm, is crippled, limping out of the bay. The infantry on deck, the Minnesota singing third, cling to the rails. The light was on us, and the shells were just screaming, like the world was ending. Captain Fancourt orders one final desperate charge, full speed ahead, Broke barrels through the deadly rain of gunfire, straight for the invisible anti-submarine boom. If the boom holds, the ship will be trapped and annihilated. If it breaks, the landing force is dropped into a death trap. The year was 1942, and the world was engulfed in the flames of the Second World War. In the vast expanses of North Africa, the sands shifted under the treads of tanks and the boots of infantrymen, as Allied and Axis forces clashed in a theatre that would determine the fate of Europe. Operation Torch, the ambitious Anglo-American invasion of French North Africa, marked the first major joint offensive by the Western Allies against the Axis powers. Launched on the 8th of November 1942, it aimed to seize control of Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia from Vichy French forces, those loyal to the puppet government in occupied France, and squeeze the German Afrika Korps, led by the legendary Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, between advancing British forces from the east and the new Allied front from the west. At the heart of this grand strategy lay Algiers, the gleaming white city on the Mediterranean coast, with its deep-water harbour serving as a vital lifeline for supplies, troops and fuel. But the harbour was no easy prize, guarded by formidable Vichy French coastal batteries, including the Batterie des Arcades on the southern hills with its 3 medium guns capable of raining devastation on any intruder, and other gun emplacements that reconnaissance photos had mistakenly identified as mere latrines. It was a fortress of steel and concrete. The Vichy regime, embittered by previous British strikes like the devastating attack on their fleet at Mers el-Kébir in July 1940, where over 1,200 French sailors perished in a hail of British shells, was prepared to resist fiercely. Intelligence suggested they might scuttle ships, demolish docks, and sabotage cranes to deny the Allies this crucial asset, turning the port into a useless graveyard of twisted metal and sunken hulks. Enter Operation Terminal, an audacious sub-operation within Torch, codenamed to evoke finality, but fraught with peril. 2 aging British destroyers, HMS Broke and HMS Malcolm, were tasked with smashing through the harbour's floating boom, a massive steel anti-submarine barrier likely composed of heavy chains or nets strung between jetties to block unauthorized vessels, and landing 634 American soldiers directly onto the quays. Their mission: secure key installations like the power station, oil depot and seaplane base before demolition charges could be ignited. It was a gamble blending naval daring, infantry resolve, and the uncertain fog of wartime alliances. Success could accelerate the Allied campaign. Failure meant annihilation under withering fire from shore batteries and counter-attacking troops. The operation's gripping tale is one of courage clashed with chaos, where a small band's valour shaped the tide of war. Amid the broader sweep of history, personal voices emerge, like that of Lieutenant Leslie Bailey, who recalled the eerie silence before the storm, or Private First Class Harold Cullum, whose solitary crawl under fire became a defining image of resilience. These intimate accounts anchor the grand history, reminding us that behind every tactical map were hearts pounding with fear and resolve. To understand the daring of Operation Terminal, one must grasp the broader canvas of the Second World War in 1942. The Axis powers dominated Europe. Nazi Germany occupied France, the Low Countries, and much of Eastern Europe, while Italy controlled parts of the Mediterranean. In North Africa, Rommel's Africa Corps had pushed the British Eighth Army to the brink at El Alamein in Egypt, threatening the Suez Canal and Middle Eastern oil fields. The Soviet Union, battered by Operation Barbarossa, pleaded for a second front to relieve pressure on its forces, their cities crumbling under relentless German assaults. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill opted for North Africa as that front. Operation Torch would involve over 100,000 troops in simultaneous landings at Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers. The choice of Vichy French territory was deliberate. It avoided direct confrontation with German forces initially, and political overtures, via American diplomats like Robert Murphy, aimed to sway French commanders like Admiral Jean Darlan to the Allied side. Yet Vichy loyalty ran deep, fueled by resentment over Mers el-Kebir and Dakar. French forces in Algeria numbered around 60,000, equipped with modern artillery, tanks, and aircraft. Their officers torn between duty and the allure of liberation. Algiers was the jewel. Its harbour could handle massive convoys, essential for sustaining the push into Tunisia. But beach landings alone wouldn't suffice. The port needed to be captured intact. Inspired by the successful harbour rush at Diego Suarez in Madagascar earlier that year, where a British destroyer breached defences under fire, planners devised Terminal and its twin, Reservist, for Oran. Despite warnings, some called it a suicide mission. General Dwight D. Eisenhower approved, noting the potential rewards outweighed the risks. Churchill's quip about nighttime ambiguity underscored the plan's reliance on surprise and confusion. "In the night, all cats are grey," he said, highlighting how darkness might blur friend from foe. The Eastern Task Force under British Lieutenant General Kenneth Anderson, but with American Major General Charles Ryder leading the amphibious phase, included British and American units. To minimize resistance, American flags flew, and broadcasts in French urged cooperation. But as one intelligence officer noted, identification in darkness was a wild card. The plan accounted for contingencies: Plan A for unopposed entry, Plan B for light resistance, Plan C for heavy fire. Yet no plan could fully prepare for the human element, the fear in a sailor's gut as searchlights pierced the night, or the resolve of a French gunner defending his homeland. At the vanguard stood two veteran destroyers from the Royal Navy's storied fleet. HMS Broke, the lead ship, was a Thornycroft-type flotilla leader of the Shakespeare class, launched in 1920 and completed in 1925. Displacing 1,554 long tons standard and 2,009 tons at full load, she measured 329 feet overall, with a beam of 31 feet 6 inches and a draft of 12 feet 3 inches. Powered by 4 Yarrow boilers feeding 2 Brown Curtis-geared steam turbines, she generated 40,000 shaft horsepower for a top speed of 36.5 knots, up to 38 in trials. Her armament included 5 BL 4.7-inch Mark I guns in superfiring pairs, a QF 3-inch anti-aircraft gun, 2 QF 2-pounder pom-poms, and 6 21-inch torpedo tubes. By 1942, modified as a short-range escort, she sported a Hedgehog anti-submarine projector and 6 20mm Oerlikon cannons, with Type 272 radar and high-frequency direction finding gear. Her motto, "In ardua tendit," he strives in difficulties, encapsulated her role. Commanded by Captain Henry St. John Fancourt, a Jutland veteran known for his tactical acumen and steady nerve, Broke had a storied pre-war career. Commissioned in 1925, she served in the Mediterranean Fleet, leading the 4th Destroyer Flotilla. Refits in the 1930s kept her seaworthy, and by war's outbreak, she was escorting convoys, hunting U-boats, and aiding evacuations like Operation Ariel from France in 1940. In April 1941, she rescued 180 survivors from the burning armed merchant cruiser Comorin, her crew pulling exhausted men from oily waters amid flames. Her sailors, battle-hardened from Atlantic patrols, knew the sting of enemy fire, the acrid smell of cordite, the jolt of explosions rocking the deck. Her sister, HMS Malcolm, was similar, 332 feet long, 1,530 tons, armed with two 4.7-inch guns and lighter weapons. Together they formed Terminal's naval spearhead, bows reinforced to ram the boom, quarter-inch iron plates welded as shields against small arms fire. Fancourt, overall commander, boarded Broke with Colonel Swenson, while Malcolm carried the executive officer. The ship's crews, a mix of seasoned tars and young recruits, shared stories below decks, tales of narrow escapes and lost comrades that steeled them for the coming ordeal. The assault troops were no elite commandos, but everyday Americans from the 3rd Battalion, 135th Infantry Regiment, 34th Red Bull Infantry Division, a National Guard unit from Minnesota activated in 1941. Nicknamed the Singing Third for their raucous marching tunes that echoed through training camps, they hailed from farms, factories, and small towns, many with Scandinavian roots. Their regimental motto, "To the last man," harked back to Civil War heroism at Gettysburg, where ancestors had charged into cannon fire with unyielding grit. Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Swenson, a charismatic leader from Stillwater, Minnesota, commanded them. A former assistant warden at the state penitentiary, Swenson was known for his profane pep talks, tactical sharpness, and unyielding spirit. He once boasted his top sergeant could outfight him, ensuring discipline through respect rather than fear. His humour lightened tense moments. Before embarkation, he quipped to his men about charging like stripy-arsed baboons, a phrase that became legendary among the battalion. The 634 soldiers, including 40 British naval personnel in US uniforms for boarding parties, trained briefly in Northern Ireland. Rumours of mountain manoeuvres in the Sperrins hinted at the mission's nature, but the reality was a crash course in amphibious assaults, scaling nets, practicing debarkations under simulated fire, all while battling seasickness on mock runs. Equipped with rifles, machine guns, mortars, and rifle grenades, their sole anti-tank weapon, they were to seize specific objectives: Companies I and K the key and oil depot, L the power station. Plans A, B, and C accounted for contingencies, with evacuations signalled by 3 siren blasts. Most troops crammed on deck due to limited berths below, enduring the roll of waves and the sting of salt spray. Personal stories abound, painting vivid portraits of the men. Lieutenant Leslie Bailey, a platoon leader in the 135th, recalled the tension aboard. "We could see the flashes of artillery in the distance, but nothing from the harbour." His words capture the quiet dread before battle, the way men clutch their rifles, whispering prayers or jokes to ward off fear. Private First Class Harold Cullum, a young Minnesotan, would later recount his wounding on the dock, crawling through debris as shells whistled overhead, his mind racing with thoughts of home. Medic Melvin Lein, known for his steady hands, prepared his kit with quiet determination, unaware he'd soon sacrifice himself aiding a fallen officer. Staff Sergeant Robert Rooney, a burly farmhand, shared stories of his family's homestead, boosting morale with tales of bountiful harvests. These were citizen soldiers, seasick and crammed on deck, facing their first combat, their hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and terror. One anecdote from training highlights their spirit. During a rainy drill in Ireland, a private slipped on a muddy slope, tumbling into a ditch. Swenson hauled him out laughing. "That's how we'll slide into Algiers, wet, dirty, and ready to fight." Such moments forged bonds, turning strangers into brothers before the real firestorm. On 26th of October 1942, the 135th boarded the cruiser HMS Sheffield for the Mediterranean convoy, the decks humming with the low thrum of engines and the chatter of men adjusting to ship life. Briefed on 29th October by Fancourt using maps of the unnamed harbour, they learned the plan's boldness, the need to breach under fire, secure objectives amid chaos. Transfer to the destroyers occurred on the 6th or 7th of November off Algiers, Malcolm at 4:30 p.m, Broke at 5:30 p.m. Swenson shouted encouragement as men clambered aboard with gear, the transfer a precarious dance over rolling waves, ropes straining and hands gripping tightly. Aboard, the air was thick with anticipation. Sailors and soldiers shared cigarettes, trading stories, British tales of Dunkirk evacuations, American yarns of boot camp pranks. The warm Mediterranean breeze carried hints of land, but also the metallic tang of oiled guns. As H hour approached on the 8th of November, the main torch landings succeeded on beaches around Algiers, troops wading ashore under sporadic fire. But for Terminal, the drama unfolded at 2:20 a.m. under a moonless sky, the darkness so complete it felt like a living shroud. The city lay dark, distant artillery flashes the only light, orange bursts flickering like distant campfires. Searchlights probed the night as the destroyers accelerated, their bows slicing through inky waters, engines roaring to full power. Lieutenant Bailey described the scene vividly. Upon closer approach, we could see at irregular intervals the orange flashes of artillery fire to the rear of Algiers, but not from the batteries within the city limits. Suddenly, all lights were extinguished, leaving only the dim outline of the higher buildings visible through the dusky gloom. The warmth of the night allowed men to lie on deck, but tension gripped them, the creak of metal, the whisper of waves, the faint smell of funnel smoke mixing with sweat and fear. Broke led the charge, but the floating steel anti-submarine boom, its massive chains or nets rendered invisible in the thick murk of night and smoke, proved elusive at first. The first pass, a tense build-up as the ship surged forward at full speed, crew braced for impact, hearts racing, but nothing. Only the rush of water and a missed opportunity, forcing a wide turn amid choking smoke from the funnels that blinded the bridge. The second attempt mirrored the first, searchlights now questing like predatory eyes sweeping across the bay and pinning the ships in harsh beams. Men ducked instinctively, shadows dancing on deck as the light exposed them. On the third, Malcolm surged ahead, her silhouette cutting through the gloom. At 4:06 a.m. the night erupted. Vichy coastal guns from Batterie des Arcades opened fire, shells screaming overhead like banshees, exploding in geysers of water that drenched the decks. One round struck Malcolm's smokestack, another amidships, igniting mortar ammunition in a blaze of orange flames and acrid smoke. Chaos ensued, men shouting, fire hoses spraying, as Second Lieutenant William Muir leapt into action. With flames licking at crates of explosives, Muir grabbed burning boxes and hurled them overboard, his hands blistering from the heat, inspiring others to join in a frantic effort that saved the ship from detonation. But the cost was high. 10 crew dead, many wounded, speed reduced to a limp 4 knots. Malcolm withdrew, her hull groaning, leaving Broke alone in the maelstrom. Muir's heroism became a whispered legend among survivors. He later received a mention in dispatches and a Silver Star, but his act in that moment, silhouetted against the fire, ignoring pain, embodied the raw courage that defined the night. The heavy barrage signalled that the operation had shifted irrevocably from the hoped-for Plan A of unopposed entry to the dire contingencies of Plan C, where intense resistance demanded improvised tactics and unyielding resolve. Now isolated, HMS Broke pressed on for a 4th attempt, the air thick with the crack of gunfire and the metallic ping of shrapnel. Captain Fancourt ordered full speed, the turbines whining as the ship hurtled toward the boom. Time seemed to slow. Sailors gripped rails, Americans clutched weapons, the darkness broken only by muzzle flashes from shore. The impact came suddenly, a shuddering jolt that ran through the hull like a thunderclap, steel grinding against steel as Broke's reinforced bow cleaved the floating barrier. But Broke sliced through at 5:20 a.m., cheers erupting from the crew as she entered the harbour's relative calm. Almost no sensation they had even struck the boom, one sailor recalled, but the triumph was short-lived. Diverting from the blocked Grande Mole to Quai de Falaise, Broke pulled alongside amid sporadic machine gun fire from docked vessels and warehouses. The staccato rattle of bullets pinged off the iron shields, wounding several, the smell of gunpowder mixed with the harbour's oily stench. Broke's 20mm Oerlikon cannons barked in response, tracers arcing like fiery arrows to silence the enemy positions, explosions blooming in the dark. Troops poured ashore in a rush of boots on concrete, Swenson bellowing, "Light out like stripy-arsed baboons up the wharf until you can get some cover. Then fight like hell!" Companies I and K secured the quay and oil depot, their advance a blur of shadows and shouts, while L Company pushed toward the power station. Sporadic fire claimed victims. Medic PFC Melvin Lein dashed under a hail of bullets to aid a wounded officer, applying bandages amid the chaos only to be cut down on his return, his body crumpling as machine gun bursts tore the air. He earned a posthumous Distinguished Service Cross for his selfless act. Staff Sergeant Robert Rooney, seeing Private Lawrence Fonda fall, charged forward in a heroic burst, scooping him up under withering fire and carrying him to safety, bullets kicking up dust around them. Rooney's Distinguished Service Cross citation praised his gallant disregard for personal safety, an anecdote of brotherhood amid bedlam. By 8 a.m. the objectives were held, the city smelling like a bar room from alcohol-fueled vehicles. French envoys approached under a white flag, 4 locals seeking surrender terms, but a French officer warned of encirclement and intent to fight. Artillery resumed, northern batteries pounding positions with earth-shaking booms. At 9:30 a.m., Broke took 22 hits, shells crashing into her hull with deafening roars, flooding compartments and igniting fires. In the sick bay, a round exploded, killing one doctor instantly. The other, severely wounded with a severed arm, calmly self-administered morphine and instructed an American medic on amputations before passing out, a poignant display of composure in crisis. Fancourt signalled withdrawal with 3 piercing siren blasts, the sound cutting through the din like a mournful wail. About 60 Americans re-embarked, scrambling aboard amid falling shells, but Swenson chose to hold, believing reinforcements imminent. PFC Harold Cullum, wounded on the dock, crawled toward the ship, pain shooting through his body, but arrived too late. Lying prone with his canteen and sulfur tablets, he watched Broke pull away, shells bracketing the water around her, his mind filled with a quiet resolve. God, please don't let me die here. As Broke withdrew, damaged but defiant, limping out under tow from HMS Zetland, the troops on shore faced escalating threats that built upon the Navy's hard-won breach, transforming a momentary naval victory into an impossible ground predicament for the infantrymen. The air hummed with the whine of incoming shells, explosions shaking the ground and sending plumes of dust skyward. French Senegalese infantry from the 13th Régiment de Tirailleurs Sénégalais advanced with disciplined fire, their shouts echoing off warehouse walls. Armoured cars from the 5th Régiment de Chasseurs d'Afrique rumbled in, machine guns chattering, marking the shift from the initial coastal artillery barrage to a full-scale ground counter-offensive driven by Vichy resentment and duty. By 11 a.m., Allied Albacore dive bombers screamed overhead, their bombs silencing northern batteries in bursts of flame and smoke. But ammunition dwindled. Mortars were held back by Swenson to avoid civilian casualties, a decision born of humanity amid war's brutality. At 11:30 a.m., 10 Renault tanks clanked forward, their cannons booming, treads grinding over debris. The Americans, lacking anti-tank guns, resorted to rifle grenades and bayonets, desperate charges where men leaped onto hulls, jamming explosives into tracks amid the roar of engines and the sting of cordite. One soldier recalled the terror. The tanks came like monsters from the shadows, their guns swiveling, spitting death. Pinned down, squads fought house to house, bullets ricocheting off walls, the acrid smell of burnt powder choking the air. Cullum, hidden nearby, bandaged his wounds, whispering prayers as battle raged. Seeing the futility, no retreat possible, men falling in heaps, Swenson surrendered at 12:30 p.m. to avert massacre. "We held as long as we could," he later said, his voice steady but eyes haunted. The battalion had clung for 7 hours, preventing widespread sabotage, their stand a testament to endurance. Captivity was brief, but harsh. Enlisted men were looted by Senegalese troops, rifles stripped, watches snatched in a frenzy of shouts and shoves. But a French officer intervened, pistol drawn, threatening execution to restore order, his command cutting through the chaos like a knife. Officers were interrogated but treated with courtesy by some naval counterparts, sharing coffee and stories of shared foes. All were released within days, 10th of November, as Algiers fell to the larger Allied forces, the city's streets echoing with victorious cheers. Swenson's men, battered but unbroken, regrouped. Cullum, rescued later, reflected, "I thought of home, the farms, and how far we'd come." Such anecdotes of resilience dotted the aftermath, weaving personal threads into history's tapestry. Despite the valour shown, the cost of the assault was heavy. HMS Broke, holed and flooding from the punishing barrage in Algiers harbour, was taken in tow, but tragically sank on the 10th of November 1942, in rough seas, her hull groaning as waves claimed her. Personal effects, letters from home, lucky charms, sank with her, a poignant loss. Her crew was rescued by accompanying ships. Her sister, HMS Malcolm, repaired amid the clang of hammers and welders' sparks, returned to service, her scars a badge of honour. Casualties, while relatively light compared to the disastrous Operation Reservist at Oran, where 90% perished, were significant. In Operation Terminal, 15 Americans were killed and 33 were wounded. 25 British sailors died and 25 were injured. French losses numbered around 70 killed and 100 wounded. Yet each number hid stories. Lein's final dash, Rooney's rescue, Muir's firefighting, stories of courage and sacrifice. Though the raid did not successfully hold the harbour against the French counterattack, it succeeded in its primary strategic goal. The vital port facilities remained intact, preventing the widespread scuttling of ships or demolition of docks that intelligence had warned of. This enabled rapid resupply, allowing Allied ships to dock by the 16th of November. This crucial logistical breakthrough fueled the push into Tunisia and expedited the eventual defeat of Axis forces in Africa by May 1943. The bravery of the American infantrymen was acknowledged. The 3rd Battalion, 135th Infantry Regiment became the 34th Division's honour guard, their bravery etched in history as they went on to fight through gruelling campaigns in Italy and beyond. From archives, Bailey's monograph recounts the operation in detail. The tense voyage, the failed passes where searchlight beams swept out across the bay and soon fell on the intruders, the breach and landing amid small arms fire which diminished to sniping. His words slow the action, capturing the pulse of battle, the way men's breaths caught as shells whistled, the relief of securing objectives. Swenson's accounts highlight leadership, refusing to bombard civilians, his surrender a calculated mercy. Operation Terminal exemplifies the raw courage of Allied forces in World War II's early turning points. HMS Broke's daring breach, the infantrymen's tenacious hold, these acts turned potential disaster into strategic triumph. In the words of Swenson, they fought to the last man, embodying the alliance that would win the war. Today, their story reminds us of the human cost behind victory, a testament to those who strove in difficulties. The 34th Division logged over 500 combat days, liberating Europe from tyranny. Memorials in Minnesota honor the singing third, their songs now echoes in history. Muir, who survived to fight in Tunisia but succumbed to malaria in 1943, represents the fleeting nature of heroism. As Bailey reflected years later, "We were just boys doing what had to be done," his voice cracking with memory.